Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
I am Chris Huddleston.
And today, we are both very excited to be talking to you all about the 1986 classic of my childhood. I don't know about yours, but Clash of the Titans.
In an ancient age, before recorded time, men were measured by their courage, and women by their beauty. Mighty gods ruled the universe, and fear and destruction covered the world. It was a time of darkness, when only the force of love could bring back the light. Now, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer presents Clash of the Titans, a sweeping legend of a golden age. Soon, the motion picture epic of our time. Enter into the wondrous world of Perseus and Andromeda, a world of passion and power, beauty and bravery, mystery and magic. A world that transcends fantasy and leaps into legend. One courageous man rides between an angry heaven and the fury of hell on earth. He rides a winged stallion across the sky. He rides to save the one who owns his heart. He rides towards wonders no man has ever seen and terrors no man has ever faced. Clash of the Titans, starring Laurence Olivier, Maggie Smith, Ursula Andress, Burgess Meredith, Claire Bloom, and introducing Harry Hamlin as Perseus and Judi Bowker as Andromeda. It will touch you, shock you, dazzle your senses, and sweep you to the limits of your imagination. Clash of the Titans.
Do you have a synopsis for us, Mr. Huddleston?
I do, and I don't mean to correct you, but it was 81.
What? Really?
1981, yes.
Oh, wow.
So Clash of the Titans was an 81 film directed by Desmond Davis, and it stars Harry Hamlin, Laurence Olivier, Judi Bowker, Claire Bloom, Maggie Smith. You have Mickey. What's Mickey's name from Rocky? Burgess Meredith.
Burgess
In
Meredith.
there as well. And the synopsis is Perseus, played by Harry Hamlin, son of the Greek god Zeus, Laurence Olivier, grows up on a deserted island. His destiny is to marry Princess Andromeda, Judi Bowker, who will someday rule the city of Joppa. But as soon as the satyr Calibos, Neil McCarthy, man, this is longer than I expected it to be, who uses a giant vulture to kidnap Andromeda's soul every night, is alive, no one can marry her. Perseus travels to Joppa, where he must defeat Calibos and other mythological monsters to rescue Andromeda. Okay.
I thought it was going to give us a blow-by-blow of the whole movie.
Yeah, it was getting there, wasn't it? All right. So you said this was a classic of your childhood. So had you seen this since your childhood?
I have, yeah. And it's been a few years, but I did go back and revisit it a few years ago. But I remember it so vividly from when I was a kid. I think that I probably credit this movie with my fascination of Greek myth in general. Like, it just really got its hooks in me. And of course, we'll talk about Ray Harryhausen's animation. But I mean, spoiler alert, I love this movie. Love it. So, had you seen it? You saw it as a child?
Yeah, I watched this many, many times as a child. This one would be, in terms of me watching it over and over again, would be, I don't know why people always want to text me while we're recording, but this would be one of these movies, along with the original Star Wars and The Black Hole, that I just watched over and over and over and over and over again. I don't really remember when I last watched this. I do not think I had watched it as an adult. I don't know if I even watched, maybe I saw this in high school at some point. I don't know. But it was a little bit surprising to me how much I remembered of this. Because I can watch a movie and then watch it again a couple of years later and have forgotten a lot of it. But I think just because I watched this so many times, so many of the key scenes, the stuff with the Kraken and Medusa and the owl, the mechanical owl, stuck in my, it was like, oh, okay, this is just as I remembered it. It was a little strange watching it now because it feels very dated, even by 1981 standards. If you take the actors out of it that I would know based on their age, Harry Hamlin was really young here. He went on to be a big star, mainly with LA Law, I think, on TV. But he was a big star in the 80s. So, that would be a giveaway. But aside from that, if I watched it and it said, the release was 1965, I wouldn't be at all surprised, because even, the stop motion is dated, but just the look of the film when
but no one was doing stop motion like that in 1965.
No, that's not really my point. But even the look of the outside of the stop motion stuff, just the stuff with real live actors, it feels like when they're on sets, it feels like 60s television almost. It just seems like a just very much a bygone era that didn't even exist in, say, the late 70s and early 80s. I want to get into box office here later in the discussion, but Raiders of the Lost Ark was released the same year, and it's not fair to compare this to Raiders of the Lost Ark because that's such a great movie. But just in terms of Raiders of the Lost Ark, seems like made in a completely different time frame,
Yes.
from this. Not, just in terms of filmmaking, it just feels like 60s, maybe early 70s film. It was fun to watch it. I do really enjoy all the Harryhausen stuff. The Kraken is still, as a kid, so I would have been, when I first watched this, probably 7 or 8 years old, and I can remember watching this and then talking to kids on the playground about this, how awesome I don't know if we used the word awesome yet then, but the Medusa scene in particular was just so cool then and scary, and the Kraken was scary and everything. And I think a lot of that holds up pretty well. Probably my major complaint would be with this would be it's 2 hours long. And I mean, and I know our attention spans have decreased a lot over the decades, but this movie should not be longer than an hour and a half. It definitely drags at times, but the cast is good. You have all these classic actors, and then you have the younger actors like Harry Hamlin. It's another thing that's a bit strange about it is we watched Star Crash a few weeks ago, and that is a bad movie. Clash of the Titans is not a bad movie. It just doesn't fit today. You know what I mean? It just feels so foreign to what we're kind of used to. Well, and so I do think it would gain from, we talked about with Star Crash, that would be a really fun film to see in the theater. I think this would definitely be a movie that it would be more entertaining if you watched it, with some friends.
It would be interesting to take a scalpel to this movie and see how much air you could take out of it. Just scenes where it's like, okay, this is them coming around the pass near the mountaintop, and
a lot of travel.
And it's a 9-second shot. Like, I wonder if we could get away with this being a 6-second shot. You know what I mean? And just really shave. I'm not talking about excising any actual scenes. I'm just saying, I wonder how much you could take the air out of it a little bit, because there is a pace to it that doesn't fit with, I think, our contemporary MCU conditioned brains. But what I was going to say is this is really a fantasy movie, right? So this is a genre. You say, well, it's Greek myth. It's not Tolkien. You go, okay, but it's not science fiction. It's not really a drama. It's a fantasy, and it's based in Greek myth, but there's monsters and magic, and it's a fantasy movie. And I think that, it made me think of things like Ben-Hur and these sort of classic
That's a
big
good
set
comparison.
piece, period dramas, but aimed more at kids. And that being said, though, it didn't pander. I didn't feel like, some movies aimed at kids feel like they insult the intelligence of their viewers. Like, oh, kids are going to love this. Well, don't treat them like kids. Treat them like, adults with different interests. This one, I think I still enjoyed the performances. I thought the casting was great. Laurence Olivier,
I like the
was a
casting
delight.
a lot.
I love the makeup they did on Calabas. And some of his performance is almost because he's working with almost a full face mask. Like, we see his eyes and it moves around his mouth, but his performance is very very big, like he was playing it on a 1,000-seat outdoor stage. But I think that kind of fit the material. It fit the prosthetic stuff on his face that I thought looked really good. You can tell it's prosthetic. You can tell that the claymation is claymation, but it's done with such wonderful design and character that,
Design, yeah, that's a good word. And that was one thing that I didn't really quite get. So basically, when it's a close-up, it's the actor in makeup. And then anything that is a wide shot, it's stop motion. And I didn't really understand why it needed to be stop motion. Why could they have not just put him in a costume other than to have the tail move? I didn't really understand why that couldn't just be a costume.
They might have tried it and not liked the way
Maybe it just looked bad. Yeah.
But what I like to remember about this when I watch it is that, so you think, oh, Harryhausen did Clash of the Titans. Oh, the Medusa, so cool, right? The Kraken, oh, that was awesome. He also did the Scorpions, right? And he did Pegasus. So, or you think Sinbad, or I guess is it Sinbad where there's the skeleton army? I mean, you think sort of fantasy stuff and monsters.
I think that's maybe Jason and the Argonauts. They might have done it in Sinbad too. I don't know.
But he also,
I love those movies.
Pegasus looks great. You can tell Pegasus is stop motion, but Pegasus is a photorealistic horse with the wings. And I love the shots of Perseus. When Pegasus flies, it runs through the air, right? So the horse is galloping, but there's a kind of but the wings are going. So the body of the horse is sort of undulating with the wings. Like, he devised an entire, like, how would a flying horse look when it flew? And I just think it's so visually poetic. I had forgotten that. I mean, I had forgotten the sort of how much of this is that stop motion animation, because there's a lot of it in this. And the kind of big ticket, like Medusa, that scene burned into my mind as a kid. I was like, whoa, that is so cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
And even all the setup to it, I love how they do the setup where they're going into her lair or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And there's the different men that have already been petrified,
Yeah.
That's a really great setup.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, the sets and the production design from top to bottom. Sometimes it looks a little bit right off the costume rack, like when he's got some soldiers going with him, they put on their helmets, and those helmets don't look like they've seen battle. Those helmets look brand new. And, and their tunics that they wear look fresh. I
wonder how much of that is we're watching it in HD now. And if you had, in the theater, it would have been one thing.
Maybe.
But watching it on TV, we probably never noticed any of that,
Maybe. But Zeus he orders the other gods to give him gifts, and he gets a sort of a sword that will never dull, and it can cut marble like it's butter. And he has a shield that he uses with Medusa. Those things are highly polished and sparkling, and that works because they're kind of divine gifts, I mean, as I do, I'm nitpicking here, but I thought the design, like when he meets what's his name, his sort of Ben Kenobi character,
the Burgess Meredith
yeah,
character.
Burgess Meredith's character. You remember his name in the movie?
I'll look here. You just talk and I'll look.
Anyway, when he first meets him, he wakes up in this sort of amphitheater. The gods relocate him, and he says, "Oh, well, you're a prince. Let's get you." And he goes back and then pulls out from his costumes. He pulls out a cloak, and it's basically just a cape with the nice pin that he pins around him. And he's like, "Now you look like a prince." And one of the things I love about that is it's kind of true to that's probably they weren't wearing a lot of clothes, basically tunics and free flowing things, and he does, but it's also a kind of a child's dress up. Like, I love that they sort of start the adventure in an amphitheater because it kind of makes it feel like the beginning of an enormous game of make believe. And I feel like it invites us as the audience into like, all right, we need a sword and we need a shield and we need a cape, and now we are ready to be heroes, and then he goes and becomes the hero.
Burgess Meredith is Ammon, Ammon.
Ammon.
And what a treasure Burgess Meredith was. He's probably, he had a really long career, but he's probably most famous for Mickey in the Rocky films. But, he's in this and he's in that. Did you ever see he was in several Twilight Zone episodes, but did you ever see the one about the guy where he's the guy who just wants to read? Have you ever seen that one?
I mean, it rings a bell.
I'll just say this real quick, but he's a guy who he just wants more time to read, and there's a nuclear war, and it's like he's the last man on Earth, and he goes to the library, and there's just all the books that he'll ever be able to read, for the rest of his life, and he drops his glasses and breaks them. That's the end of the Twilight Zone episode. So yeah, I mean, Burgess Meredith, I don't know if younger people would know who Burgess Meredith is, but he was a really, really great actor.
Yeah, and he really sets the tone. He really sets the tone in this. He says, what should I, when they find the helmet, the sword, and the shield, he has a line that really stays with me where he goes, you don't, when you get a gift from the gods, you just accept it. You don't question it. And there's just a way in which he said this, we all baked into that, but it's like, he's also just teaching a younger man, like, the gods are fickle and they're all powerful. And if they give you something, you say, thank you. Right. That's just, don't overthink it. Don't think about it at all. Just the gods are the gods. And which is really interesting because we see the gods. It's kind of upstairs, downstairs. Like, we spend time up on Mount Olympus with the gods, and they are vain and fickle and jealous.
Yeah, they have a lot of the flaws of humans, right? All the flaws of humans.
Oh, what about that scene? What about that scene where Andromeda's mother says, "Oh, she's even more beautiful than the goddess," right? And they're standing in front of, was it Thetis? Which was the goddess that she blasphemed? It was Calibos's mother. And so then there's this sort of thunderous sound, and the head of the statue breaks off and falls, and then they superimpose her face and she talks to them. That's another scene. It's like, that was awesome.
Yeah, that was seared. And like I said, I was amazed at how much stuff I remembered. What I did not remember, and surprised me a little bit, this is a PG-13 film and it's for kids. There's some nudity in this.
Yeah.
Did that kind of where you're just like, whoa. And it's in the first
Yeah.
couple of minutes of it. It's not gratuitous, it's not like sexual or anything, but it's Perseus's mother
And young Perseus.
she's breastfeeding, and so you see her one of her breasts, and then they're walking down the beach, nude. You just see them from behind, and then later in the film, you see Andromeda. There's kind of like a side boob thing, and then because she's getting up out of a bath,
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting. But I did a little bit of reading on this, and so this was a British film, and they Burgess Meredith was cast because I forget who there was a British actor that they wanted in that role, and they cast Burgess Meredith because they felt like they needed more American actors. But the original choice for Perseus was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
No
Because
kidding.
I guess he would have been coming off of Conan the Barbarian, I guess. But the writer was a woman.
I think that would have been wrong. I don't think that would have worked.
Yeah, and ultimately they decided that they thought he couldn't handle the dialogue, basically. But the writer was, I'm going to look up her name here because I don't want to get that wrong. But the writer was a woman, and it was a little more intense. So the writer was Beverly Cross. In her original script, there was more gore in it. And also the scene with Andromeda in the end, when she's chained up and the Kraken comes out of the water, she was supposed to be nude for that. And they were like, this is a kid's movie. We don't want to have this gore in there. We don't want to have this nude, But so I don't know. That was just, it was interesting to me in this PG film that there was this little bit of nudity in there that,
but the ratings board has always been fickle that way. If it's tone, like you can make a very dirty feeling film that doesn't.
It was not sexual at all.
No. And especially in the beginning, when we see Perseus's mother and him as a child on this beach, it's this sort of Eden, right? It's this sort of idyllic innocence. It's like, oh, her father condemned her to death in a jealous rage and put her and her baby in this sort of coffin and dumped it in the ocean. And Zeus,
and that's pretty intense.
It is intense.
Even now in 2022, it's just like, wow, because they basically put her and her baby in a floating coffin.
It is intense, and it's a death sentence. I'm like, it'd be kinder to just cut their heads off. You're gonna put them in a box and dump them? That's messed up, man. Not that cutting their heads off wouldn't be messed up, but you get the idea. So then Zeus intervenes and says, this is not justice, right? So he says to Poseidon, see that they wash ashore, see them safely to some secluded island where they can live in peace, right? Which is what happens. So then we see them sort of wash ashore, and we see we see her breastfeeding him as a baby, and then we sort of cut to him being, I don't know, 3 or something, like 2 or 3. That's the scene where they're walking on the beach. And it's just, I mean, she's beautiful, right? Yeah. You notice that. But I feel like the nudity in this film is mostly about celebrating the beauty of the human figure, the way that these sort of Greek marbles did.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's a really
salacious at all.
No.
And when you see Andromeda getting out of the bath, there you do feel a thrill, but it's for me anyway, it didn't feel dirty. It felt like, wow, she is absolutely statuesque. She is so beautiful, right? And so is Harry Hamlin. I mean, I can't think of too many men that are more, not just handsome, but he's beautiful. And this, I mean, I have a picture of them behind him. He's just, they both look like Greek statues.
And it's interesting because this is something that I notice a lot, that you see the way kind of the idealized human form has changed a bit over time. He's in incredible shape, but he's basically just lean, right. He doesn't have any body fat or anything, but he doesn't look like a like a bodybuilder or something.
Or
So
like Wolverine,
or
right?
Wolverine,
Like
yeah.
Hugh Jackman in those Wolverine movies, where I was listening to Harry Cavill in an interview talking about he's like the worst. So you do all of this stuff in part just to protect your body. Like if you're going to be doing these action movies and doing your own stunts and stuff, being in this kind of shape is largely about just protecting your joints and, you know, not getting seriously hurt while you do it. But obviously part of it's for the appearance of it too. And he says when you're going to do a shirtless scene or something, you dehydrate for days before, like 2 days before you do that scene. You don't hydrate so that you're wringing out as much, you know, moisture from your skin to make it look as shredded as possible. So you have this crazy definition. And I thought, that sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I'd love to look like that if I didn't have to do anything. But if I had to dehydrate to look like that, I'm like, no, I'm not. I mean, maybe
Exactly,
they're paying
yeah.
me millions of dollars to do the movie, but I'm just saying
And
it's gone to extremes.
and it's almost it's a little bit sad to me that you look at this, you know, and I'm sure at the time people were just like, oh, I wish I could get in that kind of shape, you know, of Harry Hamlin and this film. But compared to now, it's so much more of an attainable, you know, it's basically just you just eat right and, you know, you exercise some, but you don't have to be a bodybuilder. I don't know. It's just I think a lot about like Harrison Ford, you know, in Temple of Doom. You know, I would be certainly happy to take my shirt off and look like that now, but it's that's attainable. Whereas you look at like you know, you brought up Hugh Jackman
Right.
or Henry Cavill or whatever, and it's like, okay, you know,
Right.
you
There's
can't
fit.
without a personal trainer, you know, and a nutritionist, you're not going to get in that kind of shape, you know.
And
Whereas Harry Hamlin, it's like, hey, this looks like a guy who lives on the beach and just eats fruit all day, you know,
a
and swims.
Mediterranean diet, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, exactly.
he's a demigod. I mean, and you know, not everybody in the movie is as attractive as these two, but that's the
No,
thing.
like you said,
He's
they're
not
both
some
just
glowing,
beautiful.
right? He doesn't have some inhuman property. He's just,
Yeah.
but
But
that's
with the
right.
nudity thing, it's a little bit funny because that was, you know, sort of growing up. My parents were, and this is, I think this is kind of the American ideal or whatever. Like violence never seemed to bother them a whole lot. You know, if it was just incredibly gory, they would have been like, "Oh, this is not good for you." But like I say, maybe they weren't paying attention, but I know I watched this movie over and over and over again, and I did not remember the nudity in this, which would have bothered them probably with other films. But like you said, it's not sexual. It's just here's the human body, you know, and this is natural. And maybe maybe I'm not giving my parents enough credit. Maybe they saw that and were just like, oh, this isn't gonna. He's 7. This isn't gonna bother him, you know. But
I mean, again, I think intent goes a long way, and
yeah,
in this movie, it's one of the things I love about the movie is how thoroughly it embraces this idea of the Greek myths, and it would and could have been more brutal. But I think that it's already some of the concept. There's nothing. They put her in the box, and then they sort of put the lid on the box, and then it's a different shot where then they kind of heave the box over the edge of the cliff, and you see it plunge into the water. They're obviously not in the box, right?
yeah.
But you can sort of hear the baby crying in the box. They do the sound effects. It is upsetting, right? So nobody is getting murdered or there's no blood. It's just their distress is real, and her father's, you know, fury and cruelty in this moment is real. And that left more of an impression on me than like Medusa or,
Oh, for sure.
you know what I mean? It's like,
And early on, I thought, wow, maybe this is a lot more hardcore of a film than I remembered it being, you know.
yeah.
And
Well,
it turned out not to be, but
yeah, it turned out not to be. And there's a couple of places where I'm like, you know, so when he goes to wherever Calabas lives in the swamp, Calabas has got some followers. They're just sort of goons, and they never seem to be doing anything. They're just all kind of like hanging out in the swamp around Calabas's throne. And you don't think about it until you start thinking about, so, what is this serving? What are they doing? Why are they here? When you start thinking about it like a filmmaker, you start to think, oh, all of these people are just like, what do they eat? And you know what I mean? Where do they sleep in the swamp? These 30 folks, but I think most of the movie is not that. Most of the movie feels of a specific universe and consistent in that regard, and the role players are all good too. Like there's a sort of there's a bearded soldier that sort of becomes his, I guess, lieutenant. He just sort of meets him for the first time when he gets to the city, and he explains, and the situation with Andromeda, you gotta answer, you can be a suitor, but there's a guy who's been burned at the stake, right? And he's like, what the heck is that? And he's like, oh, that was a suitor for the princess, remember that guy? He's like, you can go, but if you don't get the riddle right, that's what happens to you. If you get the riddle right, you get to marry her. And he's like, well, why would anybody risk it? And he's like, well, Andromeda is really beautiful. And he ends up sort of following him around throughout the movie. And his performance is great. It's like there's no stinkers. They don't stop like, old woman. Yeah, he's over there. There's no bit parts that stink in this movie. I think it's really pretty airtight.
It feels a lot like to get into the kind of like different era thing. It feels a lot like a studio film from an earlier time. You really hit it when you said Ben-Hur. It feels a lot like that,
And they do things like, so when Zeus finds out what the king has done by dumping his daughter and Perseus, his son, really, in the water, he destroys the city.
Yeah.
And it's a big, epic, sweeping shot of this Greek city being destroyed by the wrath of Zeus. And it's floods and earthquakes and, columns toppling.
And it's the Kraken who they let the Kraken out. And that was one of the things that I was wondering about and I don't remember what the exact line was, but the remake from 2010 or whatever it is, which is, in my opinion, is terrible. But the one, it became a meme basically, is Liam Neeson saying, release the Kraken. And that Zeus says, I forget what it is, they like let loose the Kraken or something like that, but it's the Kraken that does a lot of this damage.
Yes, although we don't see it like King Konging it. They release the Kraken, and then what appears to be a sort of bunch of natural disasters happening without the Kraken looming in the background, hurling boulders and stuff. But my point is, where I was going with this was, in Olympus, they have sort of this kind of model of an amphitheater, and they have little clay figures.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love the clay figures. Yeah.
And Zeus picks up the figure of the king and just crushes him in his fist. And then so we see the king being like,
yeah.
And I thought that is cool. Like,
yeah, I love that. That was great.
And we
super effective.
Like in a more modern movie, his eyes would pop out and blood would shoot out of his ears and stuff. You don't need that. You don't need that. The wide shots of people running for their lives, and it's obviously shot in different layers and assembled.
Yeah.
That doesn't change the impact of the scene. Like people running for their lives and then a column falling and crushing them and being swept away by water coming flooding out of the thing. I'm like, it's apocalyptic in the kind of Greek mythic world. It was really effective, I thought.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. And I was thinking about, watching this, and I thought, I watched this I just ate this up at 7 or 8 years old or whatever it was. But I don't remember being scared or anything, but it's like pretty intense, you know.
It's pretty intense, yeah. Well, I mean,
Um,
when you watch things like the A-Team, I don't think anyone actually got shot in the A-Team, but watching, TV shows in the 80s, people shot each other, and they'd be kind of like, and they fall down. There wasn't even a squib sometimes, but it didn't feel real, right? When you
yeah.
watch a movie that really treats violence seriously and it focuses on the person committing the violence and the victim of the violence and their, what the violence is actually doing in a realistic way.
Mhm.
It doesn't need to be extremely graphic or extremely large scale to be super duper upsetting. And I think from the 80s, there was a lot of sort of, quote unquote movie or TV violence that was, oh, then these 10 guys ran in, I took my Uzi and I took them out. And then I shot a rocket launcher and those guys all blew off and I went flying over there. But that's not how those things work. You know what I mean? If you
No.
were really seeing violence of that scale depicted realistically, you'd have like shell shock from it. It would traumatize you because violence is horrible.
Oh yeah. Something from TV that I saw as a kid that has stuck with me my entire life. And I went back and watched this like a few years. I found a YouTube video of this and it's still pretty upsetting. Did you ever watch Saint Elsewhere, the TV show Saint Elsewhere?
I must have seen an episode or two here or there.
So there is an episode, and I watched this as a kid. I don't know, I was probably like 10 years old, where Mark Harmon, uh, he I don't know if like they were trying to portray that like he was a sex addict or what, but he picks up this woman in a pharmacy and like goes home with her, and uh they're in bed together and she's on top of him. And I saw this at, I don't know, I was like fourth or fifth grade, something like that. And the woman is on top of him and they're having sex, and she opens her mouth and she has a razor blade between her teeth and just starts cutting him. And I remembered that as a kid, and I was like a few years ago, I went on YouTube and I was like, did I, is that one of those things that I just imagined, or was that real? And I looked it up, and like it's still pretty because I, from that age as a kid, I thought, oh, you got to be careful like who you take home because they might cut you with a razor blade, and so I watched it, and it's like very, it was probably like 1982, 1983, this
It makes me think of
intense
the
thing,
episode in Perfect Blue, right? That they shot. The people are like, I don't know about this episode, guys, but they still shot it and aired
yeah.
it. And I
Yeah.
remember, do you remember the day after that
Yeah, I do.
series
I
from
do.
the
Yeah.
80s, 81? Now, that was around this time period.
hmm
I don't remember a
About
single
nuclear war.
thing. Yeah, I don't remember a single thing about any episode but the very first one, where everybody's like living their lives and concerned about, the escalation of this stuff. And, a couple lying in bed being like, do you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis? And then being like, yeah, that was scary. This feels like that. I'm like, yeah, we're going to be okay. And kids in school, right? And then they launch. You can look this up too. It's messed up. There's a sequence where they're launching all the rockets. And then there's a sequence where the bombs are detonating and incinerating everyone. So the children singing in the church choir, incinerated, right? It just goes on and on. And I was a child and it scared the living daylights out of me. I was
Yeah.
certain we were all going to die in a nuclear holocaust. I was
Yeah.
positive of it for a long time because I knew what it was going to look like. And I thought this was on at like 8 o'clock, for a whole week. And it was a television event. And I'm like, this should not be prime time. This is, if I remember correctly, the rest of it looked a little bit like, the production design of the rest of it looked a little bit like Star Trek. It was people sort of shambling around in rags and I don't remember any of the rest of it, but that opening, the first part of the pilot episode was just crazy. And I thought, what are you doing? Who
But
greenlit?
it traumatized a whole generation of people,
I think they must have thought this is supposed to be cautionary. Like this can happen. This is nothing to shrug off. This is an existential threat. But
And isn't it insane to think that, not to get in, they got sidetracked into politics, but like recently there's been some talk of nuclear war again. And it's just sort of like, did they not watch The Day After?
Did you not watch The Day After? I think they know. I'm not worried about people not knowing. I'm worried about
that was something, even as a kid, I think a lot about that Sting song that I don't know if it's been sort of lost to history. I don't know if like it ever gets played anymore, but Russians.
I hope the Russians love their children too.
Yeah, I hope the Russians love their children too. And there's no such thing as a winnable war. It's the lie we don't believe anymore. Even as a kid, I think I thought the Russians that they know that it's the death of everybody, not just it's not like anybody wins in that situation. I don't know.
I think
a little far flung from our film, but
yeah, I know. I think people who have access to their own versions of the button do know this. The problem is it's everything is set up like a big thing of dominoes. Like once one person, whether it's Kim Jong-un or Pakistan or India, or Israel, or Putin or us, once somebody launches a nuclear weapon, you're just counting on everybody else with nuclear weapons to show restraint in the face of this incredible traumatic event that just happened. Like you're not going to hit back. That's absurd. Once you launch one, there's a cascade that happens, and then that's it. There's no partial, there's no tactical, right? It's just, and we know this, and yet we continue climbing this ladder. We were trying to disassemble this stuff for a while. I guess we're not anymore.
To sort of circle back to
the
Clash
movie
of the Titans, I have some Russian friends, and one of my friends, Eugene, I actually was talking to about this movie, and he had never seen it before. And so he watched it, and I talked to him a few days ago, and I was like, "Oh, what did you think about it?" And he said, "Oh, I really enjoyed it," which I thought was neat for somebody. He's in his 30s to appreciate this film.
It's
now
good filmmaking. Oh yeah. It's epic in a kind of an old style of making.
I think, and not to get old man and get off my lawn and all that, but the did you ever see I think it was 2010, did you ever see that one?
2000,
the remake?
I did, but I gotta tell you, I don't remember. I can't even remember who's in it. Was it Sam Worthington?
Yeah, Sam Worthington and Liam Neeson.
And
the famous Release the Kraken thing. But yeah, Sam Worthington.
Another thing about it, except everything was CGI. Medusa was
everything's CG, and it's terrible.
And she's sort of slithering all over and like slithering across the ceiling. And I thought, what?
And I think that's something
she's not a spider, she's a snake.
I think that's something with fantasy of the 80s. They had to be somewhat restrained. They didn't have the technology that they have now, that they can sort of in theory do whatever they want to. And I just think it was better, The
Medusa stuff is so dope in this. And the other thing about the Perseus character as depicted in this is he doesn't have superpowers. He can't jump over a building. He has a magic sword. It's not a laser sword. It's just a unbreakable sword, really, and he has a polished shield that doesn't seem to do anything other than reflect. I mean, he does use it to deflect arrows and stuff, but it doesn't do anything magical as far as I can tell. Zeus sort of talks to him in the back of it, but it's not like he tells him secrets and gives it,
Mhm.
So each of the gifts he sort of uses and then loses. Like the helmet falls in the swamp when he's fighting Calabas, and
Mhm.
but basically it's just he has the courage to do it. Like he goes into Medusa's place because that's the only way he figures he can stop the Kraken, and he hides and he's looking at her. Just he lies in wait and this is her lair. She's walking around unafraid. She's completely confident that she's just going to kill whoever these interlopers are, and he is just ice cold and stands there and waits until she gets close enough for him to strike out with his sword using only her reflection in his shield, and cuts her head off in one stroke.
That's such an
hard to do.
effective. That's such an effective scene to me. I mean, and that still really holds up well now.
And then her body falls over and her neck is just all this blood, sort of gore and goo comes out of her neck, and then Calabas stabs the head, and the blood forms the scorpions, and they have that score. It's so dope.
Here's something that I wanted to run by you. And this is, I don't want to be a broken record on this, but I talk about this a good bit. And this is something that I think about how much the film industry, the movie industry, movie business has changed during the course of our lifetime, where we just have all these Marvel films and Pixar movies and all this. So I wondered about Clash of the Titans. I thought, I knew that I loved this as a kid, but I thought, did this do well? Was this a hit at the time? And it was. Worldwide, it did about $70 million, which is, probably if you adjust for inflation, it did double that. It was the number 11 movie worldwide in 1981. So 1981, the top movie of the year was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not surprising, right? And that kind of lines up with what's going on now. The big budget blockbuster films. The number 3 movie of the year was Superman 2. So, a comic book film. If you can guess what the number 2 movie worldwide of 1981 was, I don't know what prize I'll give you, but if you can guess, and adjusted for inflation, made almost $400 million. So the number 2 movie of 1981 worldwide. It's a drama. It's not a action film or
Kramer versus Kramer.
Movie. That's a good guess, but no.
What was it? I give.
On Golden Pond.
No kidding.
If you adjust for inflation, it made $388 million. I mean, a movie like that maybe could get in the theater today, but would it be a $400 million movie? I mean,
absolutely not.
Movie about a woman and her dad, But so if you go through,
you could see it being on a streamer, and they would clock it at how many watches, but it's hard to gauge how much a movie like that would make today, because then you have ticket sales and you have there's measurable ways, and nowadays with streamers you just have how many people watched it. So I guess there's some monetary translation they must do to figure out what that equates to in terms of.
Yeah. So the top 10 movies of 1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark, On Golden Pond, Superman 2, Arthur. I mean, think about a movie like Arthur being just a box office smash. Stripes, Cannonball Run, Chariots of Fire, For Your Eyes Only, The Four Seasons. Do you know what The Four Seasons is?
No.
That's a movie with Alan Alda and Carol Burnett. I don't even remember that film at all. Time Bandits was number 10 and Clash of the Titans was number 11. It's just, again,
wow. Time Bandits beat this one out.
Yeah. Time Bandits beat it by like about $8 million. But again, like I said, I don't want to sound like, get off my lawn or whatever, but it's like basically we get now, Marvel movies, there's the occasional DC thing, Pixar movies, and like it's amazing how, you think about our youth. So films like Arthur, Stripes, and The Cannonball Run. So those are 3 comedies. And comedies are, outside of Pixar are almost non-existent now.
Right.
It's because, you look back on our youth, and I think the beloved films from our childhood, comedies are right up there with, Star Wars and
Right.
Indiana Jones and stuff,
What you get are sort of an extension of the Saturday Night Live. You get
Yeah.
McCarthy, and those comedians make kind of theme movies. Oh, she's a spy, or she's a bridesmaid, right? And they're funny. I don't have any. I'm just saying that comedies now are these kind of. They almost feel like they're trying to do what Ace Ventura did somehow. It's like people will go see them in the theater on opening weekend, but ultimately they're a renter, or there's something that you're going to watch on streaming. They're a vehicle.
I have to admit, Ace Ventura, I saw in the movie theater, and I don't know that I've ever laughed harder in a movie.
I thought that movie was hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Carrey, at his prime, he was a genius.
And nobody had you got used to him, because once that happened, the market was so saturated with Jim Carrey. But Ace Ventura as a character, you're like, what is he doing? Like, he's just so almost like Jim Varney, but on crack, like so big and so exaggerated and so absurd that the laughter was just almost disbelief. You're like, what is happening?
A movie that I've never seen that maybe we should do for the show is what was the one that he did with Ben Stiller, where the cable guy?
That wasn't Ben Stiller, was it? That was Matthew Broderick, wasn't it? Or was
maybe
Ben
Matthew Broderick? But I think Ben Stiller directed it. I've never seen the cable guy. Never watched.
I've never seen it either, and I think it didn't do great because people wanted more funny.
It's more dark. We should do that for the show. We both haven't seen it. We should do it 100%. So, all right. What do you think about maybe we should wrap up?
Yeah. Chris and Chris Talk Movies at Gmail. That's our handle. We're on the socials. Please like and subscribe, and leave us a comment and a question and a kind word. That would be great. Thank you for watching, listening, whichever you're doing. I would highly recommend this movie.
I would recommend it as well, with kind of caveats. I don't know, really younger audiences, I don't know if they would be bored by this, but it's
the pacing is an issue, I think, for today's youth. Like, I think my kids who are 13 and 11, I think they'd like it. But I do think if there was a way to wring 15, maybe even 20 minutes of not fat, but a little bit of the extra air out of it, just to kind of keep things moving, they would probably land better with them. I didn't definitely feel myself bored watching it. I didn't feel myself bored, but I did, I was settled into the couch and ready to watch it, and it was late at night, and there were in the middle, you're kind of like, oh, because I wanted him to get to Medusa, and I'm like, oh, right, he still has to do 6 other things before he gets there, and those things are fine, but you're kind of like, yeah, in today's mentality, you're kind of like, I think they thought it's an epic, it's got to be 2 hours, and they just kind of took their time with it. And in 81, pacing was a different thing.
Yeah, pacing was completely different in 81. I saw a story this week. I don't know if you've seen about this previously, but Topher Grace, like for fun, he will edit movie. Like he's I think the original Star Wars, not the original Star Wars trilogy, but the prequel trilogy, he edited down to like a shorter
Right.
And I was reading that he edited the Hobbit films. He took the 3 Hobbit films and edited them to a 2-hour movie. But yeah, get Topher Grace on this one.
Where do
You
you
know?
where do you see that? Where could you possibly see
You
that?
see that you're friends with Topher Grace and you watch that at his house.
And he invites you over to show you his.
Yeah. Somebody said, I saw a tweet about that, and they were like, how can I watch this? And they were like, go to Topher Grace's house and
Yeah,
watch
right.
it.
Because
You know, because it's
there's no way
obviously it's
that that's legal.
copyrighted.
Right, of course.
Yeah, they're not going to put it up anywhere because it's illegal. But he did his own cut of the Star Wars prequels, which are supposed to be
Right.
I think he did
There's
that like
one
10
where he
years
took
ago.
Jar Jar out of he
just completely
out of it.
Jar
And he
Jar
might have
out.
taken young Annie out of all of it too. I don't remember that. But
yeah, maybe, but which I think is pretty neat. I mean, that'd be one of those things that would be fun to do, you know, if you had the resources for that. But
yeah.
have you watched anything else recently?
You know, Rachel and I just watched The Bear on I guess it's on
Okay.
Hulu's FX show.
The whole first season of it?
Yeah. It's terrific. It is stressful. It takes place in a kitchen in Chicago and in not a relaxing watch, like oh, the tension is so crazy. But the performances are fantastic, and it does not drag. It surges forward, like it blazes through moments that you're like, man, I wish we'd have spent a little more time on that revelation there, you know. But already on the next crisis, you know.
I know that. I don't know what that actor's name is, but I know him from Shameless. I watched Shameless kind of early on, but yeah,
it's good. I recommend it.
I haven't watched the whole thing, but I watched the first, I think, 3 episodes of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. I think it's good. I think you enjoy it. It's not, you wouldn't be scared by it. It's not.
The trailer makes it look.
Yeah, the trailer makes it look terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's very, so it's you know, he's the Rod Serling of the show. He introduces it, and then it's just directors that he has handpicked to direct and they're really top directors and, you know, top actors and everything. It's not, what I've seen of it so far is not amazing, but it's good. And I love anthologies, so you know, it's right up my alley.
I wondered if you had watched that yet. Are they all out, or does it come out? What is it, HBO?
No, it's Netflix, and they didn't release it all at once, but I think it's all out now. So I think maybe it's 8 episodes, but I've only watched 3 so far. I'm sort of, you know, want to kind of savor it a little bit, and
yeah.
But there haven't been any so far that I've just been totally blown away by, but all have been entertaining so far.
Cool.
So yeah,
I'll check it out. So what do you
I think you would. Time? So I don't know if I've sent you this trailer or if you have seen it or if we've talked about it at all. I don't remember. But it comes out on November 4th. So we're recording this on November 2nd. It is a Weird Al biopic.
But that comes
starring
out
Dan.
Oh, I can't wait to see that.
Daniel Radcliffe as Weird Al. Doesn't it look great?
It looks hilarious.
So it is on the Roku channel. So I have a Roku, but even if you don't have a Roku, do you have Apple TV? Is that what you have? So you can, I don't know if you can watch it on the Apple TV or not, but you can watch it on iOS. So even if you can't watch it on your TV, you could watch it on your computer or your iPad or whatever.
The TV itself might have some sort of a Roku app. I've got a Samsung. No, I've got a LG TV that has a bunch of, it's a smart TV that has a bunch of apps. Maybe it's capable of watching it.
But it's made for, I don't know if they've done other productions, but it's a Roku production. Cool. And you don't have to pay anything for it. It's free. So, but yeah, it looks, so it's Daniel Radcliffe as Weird Al, and you have Evan Rachel Wood as Madonna, and it's written by Weird Al, and it looks great. So I think we should do that next.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm down. I love
The
it.
trailer like just looks, and it's like,
Trailer looks hilarious.
it's not real, it's like Weird Al is like a
It's
drunk
like
or a drug
magical
addict or something.
fantasy. Yeah. And then this happened. And then,
Yeah.
and then I, hijacked a blimp, stuff like
Mhm.
that. It's like big, crazy.
And I love, we can get into this more when we cover the episode, but I love that Daniel Radcliffe, he made a bunch of money from the Harry Potter movies, and now it's just like, hey, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
There was a story this week about him. He finally put to rest. There have been rumors for a while about maybe that he would play Wolverine because, for people who aren't familiar with the comics, even though, I mean, I don't know how you're ever going to top Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. He's just owned that role. But Wolverine in the comics is a short guy. And so there have always been these rumors about Daniel Radcliffe as Wolverine. And he admitted that he kind of played into him some. He gets bored on press junkets. It's like, oh, maybe I'll play Wolverine. But finally, he came out in promoting this Weird Al film, and he was just like, I don't want to be tied down to a franchise again. I just want to, and I think that's so cool to, you made your money here, and it's just like, now I can just do whatever I want.
And probably continues to make it, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's just you made those movies and then a hearty handshake, well, enjoy the rest of your life. I think he continues to get royalties. He's going to be rich on those things for generations.
And even, it's not like he's just doing all these things that just bomb. He did.
Oh, he's really
good.
Good.
A movie with Sandra Bullock. Yeah. So, I mean, he's a really interesting actor, and seemingly, from what everybody says, a very nice guy, so it's cool that, I think. But anyway, I'm very excited about this Weird Al
All right.
film.
That's what we'll do next. What's it called? Weird?
Cool. Yeah, I think it's just called Weird, and it's on the Roku channel, so it's free. Anybody can watch it for, I guess there's advertisements. I don't know.
Wonderful. Cool. Thanks everybody for listening. We're going to wrap it up. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Not too much. This was just a really fun episode because I bet I haven't seen this film in 35 years, maybe.
Good, right? It's really good.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it and you think what we're talking about, sparks your curiosity, check it out. I think it's really well done. And it's just this really creative, engaging, consistent vision of a Greek myth. And nowadays you're going to see something like the sequel where everything's CGI. And I know the CGI is not evil, but trust me, Harryhausen's animation, there's a magic to it that it makes the movie worth watching on its own. But the performances and the direction and the set design and the costume design and the entire production design make this just a magical favorite of mine, a lifetime favorite of mine.
And I saw an article, and they're probably right about this, where they said most people, their knowledge of Medusa and Perseus probably comes from this movie.
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it did for me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right then. Yeah, I'm Chris and that's Chris, and we're two Chris's. Talk to you next week.